Welcome to the latest addition to the Compliance Podcast Network, the podcast 10 for 10, which brings you the week's top 10 compliance stories curated together in one podcast each week. Tom Fox, the voice of compliance, brings you the compliance professional stories you need to be aware of at the end of your busy week. Sit back and in 10 minutes, hear about the stories every compliance professional should be aware of. Every Saturday, 10 for 10 highlights the most important news, insights, and analysis for the compliance professional, all curated by the voice of compliance, Tom Fox. Get your weekly filling of compliance stories with 10 for 10. Hosted by Tom Fox. 10 for 10 is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network. First, a word from this month's sponsor, Ethico.
In the intricate world of ethics and compliance, each second is precious, and slow case closures are more than just delays, they're missed opportunities. Enter Ethico. Our solution revolutionizes case management, cutting closure times in half and turning every challenge into a chance for improvement. Imagine a workspace where efficiency and compliance coexist harmoniously. Don't just dream of faster resolutions, make it your reality. Visit ethico.com/CPN today to book a demo and dive into our exclusive white paper by Tom Fox, the ROI of compliance, and to try our free ROI calculator. Empower your team with the tools they deserve.
It's March 2, and we're celebrating Texas Independence Day. And welcome to 10 for 10. In our first story from one of several stories from the Wall Street Journal, the crypto exchange Gemini has been ordered to return $1.1 billion to customers in a regulatory settlement with the New York Department of Financial Services. The company was also fined about $37 million over compliance failures. These compliance failures included failing to vet its partner in the EARN program, as well as AML and other compliance failures. Next up, from the Financial Times, Jillian Tett tells us that green audits are coming for your company. The significance of this story is not that the government is ordering audits around your climate change policy or sustainability. It's the business community. And when the business community starts demanding something, that's when we see real change. So green audits are coming to your company, and it's not going to be from the regulator. It's going to be table stakes to play in the business world. Next up, from the New York Times, Boeing's fallout over its MAX 9 incident where a panel blew out at 10,000 feet continues to have significant fallout as the Justice Department is reviewing whether the January incident violated the 2021 deferred prosecution agreement to settle a criminal charge against the company. Of course, in that agreement, Boeing agreed to pay $2.5 billion around the 737 MAX 8 plane crashes. And it was widely criticized as being too lenient on Boeing back then. But now, with a new Justice Department under a new administration, it's going to be interesting to see how Boeing fares under this review of their prior DPA. Our next story comes to us from the Chicago Sun-Times, which reports that the ComEd bribery sentencings have been postponed as the Supreme Court reviews an Indiana corruption case. The significance of this is that clearly millions of dollars in bribes were paid by ComEd to the Speaker of the Illinois House, Michael Madigan, but the U.S. Supreme Court has basically said that gratuities are not criminal payments and that payments in recognition of actions whether committed to occurring or have occurred, is not a bribe. So go figure, with the corruption level at this U.S. Supreme Court, really no surprise there. And our next story also comes to us from the New York Times and also follows the Boeing scandal as The FAA has given Boeing 90 days to develop a plan to address its QA/QC issues. So the culture of Boeing is corrupt, obviously, from a QA/QC and safety standpoint, and the FAA has given Boeing 90 days to try and put a plan together or turn it around. So Boeing is really in a world of trouble, and they need to step their game up. Our next story comes to us from the Financial Times, which reports that Sam Bankman-Fried has asked for a 6.5-year sentence for his massive fraud around FTX. The fact that the government has asked for a 100-year sentence, or recommended by probation officers, is he views as grotesque and barbaric. Given that FTX has now publicly said they're going to pay back all the money, this may influence the judge and may lend itself towards leniency. Next up, did they or did they not? McKinsey's CEO testified, or global managing partner rather, testified in front of Congress on February 6th that the company did not do work for the government of China. However, McKinsey's China subsidiary's website said they did do work. If they did do work and lied in front of Congress, that's obviously not good. Next up, from an interesting site called Oil Price, which I had not previously heard of, they called out Iraq and their endemic corruption as a hindrance on development, economic development in the country. They note that the British, Shell exited Iraq last week with a potential game-changing $11 billion petrochemical plant that they signed a deal on back in 2012. But this to build it was going to put such risk around Shell or for bribery and corruption due to the endemic corruption in Iraq. So if you wonder about the invidiousness of corruption, if Shell figures they can't do business without engaging in bribery and corruption, that's obviously pretty bad. Next up, our last two stories come to us from the Wall Street Journal and from the Risk and Compliance Journal. Richard Vandeford reporting that the ex-Vitol trader Javier Aguilar was found guilty of 3 counts of violating the FCPA and 1 count of conspiracy to launder money. The verdict came after a lengthy 8-week trial, which had salacious examples of bribery and corruption, payoffs in parking lots in Houston, and more importantly, corruption up and down North America, literally from Brazil and Argentina up through and including Mexico. So Vitol Trading and oil traders in general, I thought, took a huge hit on this one. Vitol had previously pled out as a company for FCPA violations, and now their trader, bagman, has been found guilty. And our final story comes to us today, not around Pillow Talk, but also from the Wall Street Journal. A husband who eavesdrops on his wife's work calls while she was working from home and found out material non-public information has pled guilty to insider trading. This was a case involving Tyler Loudon, who overheard his wife talk about BP acquiring an entity from Travel Centers or acquiring Travel Centers of America. And so he bought stock in that company. And he made more than $1.7 billion, $1.7 million on a $1.3 billion transaction. His wife, who was found innocent of any wrongdoing, this was nevertheless fired by BP. So don't engage in pillow talk and don't let your spouse hear material non-public information and act on it. As I mentioned at the start of this podcast, this month's sponsor for the entire Compliance Podcast Network is Ethico. Have you ever wondered how to show the ROI of your compliance program? Have you struggled with the budgeting process, getting the funds you want for your compliance program? Well, I've partnered with Ethico to put together a white paper on the ROI of compliance, which shows you not only how to demonstrate ROI, but also how to speak finance when you're sitting across from the CFO with your budget proposals. Check out the website and get the white paper. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of 10 for 10. I hope you will check out the newest podcast in the Compliance Podcast Network, the Compliance Tip of the Day. In Compliance Tip of the Day, I give a 5 to 8 minute summary of one tip that you can integrate into your compliance program or put together for greater compliance program efficiency.